his way to the podium. This is a man who led Labor in opposition for 8 years and who has led them in government for another 8. That's 16 years in a leadership role, and incumbency is a two-edged sword, as we're seeing increasingly in contemporary politics in Australia. We're about to hear from Mike Rann. There'll be no doubt some soul-searching after this outcome. At this stage, I suppose you'd say he's a slight favourite still to be able to form a government, but very much in doubt. I think although there's some brave cheers and applause tonight at Labor headquarters, nothing like the euphoria of 2006 when this man, Mike Rann, led his party to a landslide victory. We're assuming that he's still making his way to the podium, but he's in no rush. Here he goes. No. Perhaps he's going to talk to the media, but not in front of a microphone. This is a very odd situation. This has been a tough ride for Mike Rann and for Labor. There would have been very few times in Australian political history where a party's vote has deteriorated quite as rapidly or as spectacularly as Labor's vote and as Mike Rann's personal vote did in the lead up to this campaign and during the campaign. We've got to bear in mind that this man, until the relatively recent past, was one of the most popular leaders in Australian political history. But his personal vote fell away very rapidly. Kevin, are you able to shed any light on this? He's obviously going to say something, but he's in no rush.
He is heading his way. I'm told that he is making his way to the podium, Kerry. I think, albeit slowly. And I know Rob Lucas and I are happy to keep sitting here all night if Mike wants to walk the room, but
I was going to be unkind and suggest he was lost, but, it wasn't a night for political comment.
That somebody take his hand and lead him to the podium.
I have asked my media advisor sitting behind me to give the Premier's media advisor a ring and say,
I feel like we're...
Rob and I'd like a beer as well. I'm sure you would too, Kerry. So.
Well, in fact, I fear this has been such an intense night. I feel like we've been here for a very long time, and I think we're starting to get a little lightheaded. So bear in mind, as Mike Rann very slowly makes his way to the podium, that there is just a seat or two in this between a very narrow Labor majority and a hung parliament, with just 2 or 3 or possibly 4 seats determining the final outcome, and something like 20% of postal votes caught up in the fray. So it may easily be a week, possibly even more, before we really know. Now, without knowing the layout of the room, I don't know whether he's getting closer to the podium or not. He appears to be...
I'm sure he does.
He appears to be slowly moving his way around the outer perimeter. He doesn't have to go through the members' stand, does he?
Well, I'm not exactly certain. I
think he's about to disappear
Kerry,
through the black chasm.
Where you might be
What rabbits can we pull out of the hat now?
Well, I have been reliably informed he's on his way up to the podium now. One of my staff gave one of his staff a call and said,
looked like a very black hole he disappeared into, so he might emerge with a miner's lamp.
It was sort of ad-libbing, Kerry.
It's riveting television, anyway.
Have you got any jokes? Got any campaign jokes?
Oh, I've got a few of them, but
not for
public consumption.
Not for public consumption. Fair enough. This is a first for me. I
do. My guess is he has no idea that we're waiting on him.
Well, in fact, I would hazard a guess that this was about a 1.5 kilometre walk from the front entrance of this building to the podium, and he's not there yet. Could we send smoke signals?
Kerry, if you want me to fill in, I can...
You've got some song and dance?
No, I was just going to talk a little bit about Mitchell and to cut me off as soon as the Premier finds his way to the podium. But I was looking at the Mitchell figures a little more closely, and Dean was making rightly the point, that the important point for Chris Hanna is to finish first or second, the Liberal candidate to finish third. And there's a 2% margin between Chris and the Liberal candidate at this stage, or a bit over 2%. And now Chris Hanna is saying he's getting 50% of the Greens' preferences. If that's correct, that's another 2 to 2.5% for him over the Liberal candidate. So that would increase his margin to 4 to 5% over the Liberal candidate. Yes. Family First comes in, but they only had 3.5% of the vote. So on that basis, it would appear more likely that Chris Hanna is going to be returned if his assessment of the Greens' preferences is correct, because he does have that 2% buffer already, and as long as he comes in second, then Liberal Party preferences will put him over the line rather than the Labor candidate.
But the bottom line is that you have to take 5 seats from Labor.
That's right. This is just throwing up the issue of whether or not there's another seat for the government, or for the Labor Party, I should say, or not. Now, potentially, obviously, the Labor Party would like to take that seat. That gives them another buffer in a potential government caucus.
Well, let me ask the question of assuming that the 4 independents, with Carleen Maywald gone, that with the other 4 independents still in place and there was a hung parliament, have you got any way of being able to predict with any certainty how those 4 independents would go?
Well, I think Rob and I'd have our own starting point views. I doubt either of us would want to publicly state them at this stage. That would be unfair. But, you know, I think that there are certain...
I think you'd both have to offer the speakership to Bob Such.
Well, Bob has been Speaker before. Look, I don't know how we're going to finish that. I'm still growing in confidence that we'll be able to form a government in our own right. We have to see how Hartley falls out, and obviously Bright is far too close to call. But if we can win Hartley, well, then that should be sufficient for us. But we'll know that over the course of the next few days, Kerry.
And I think from our perspective, you know, we're moderately confident that we can take Bright. It's line ball, we accept that. But as I said, traditionally we've done pretty well with postals and a good campaign down there from our candidate. If we do that, that drops the government numbers to 24.
Then it all comes down to Hartley.
Then it does come to Hartley. And if Hartley was to fall across the line, and the government would be the favourite at this stage, a 2% margin, but we did catch up that 2.5% late in the count, which helped us. If the government holds that, they have 24. If the government doesn't hold that, then it's 23. Then the 4 independents come into play, 3 or 4, because, again, we're hopeful that, for example, in Mount Gambier, that was only 1.5% or 1.7% margin. We're hopeful that we might win that seat, and therefore it would only be the 3 independents. But again, they would come into play, and who knows where they go. The history of predicting where independents might go is fraught with difficulty in South Australia.
As Rob and I both well know.
Dean, have you seen one like this before?
No, I haven't seen one quite like this before. What makes this different from the ones before is the absolute scattered nature of the swing. Although there is a pattern. And let me say,
you've had them this close before, but...
I've heard from a colleague of yours in Tasmania who sent through something called a Twitter, whatever that is. And Anthony has done a little calculation on our behalf, sitting there in Hobart, and he's come to this conclusion...
Magical man, Anthony.
...that in marginal Labor seats, the swing is 1.7%.
Yeah.
In safe Labor seats, it's 7.7%.
Yeah.
In very safe Labor seats, it's 11.3% on average. Now, I've never seen that
swings away from Labor. Yeah.
I've never seen that pattern. And if you apply that to the Liberal seats, you've got the same thing. In the safe seats, there's a big swing.
To
the Liberal Party. Yeah. In the marginal seats, it's a smaller swing. Now, I have no idea why. I'm waiting to be offered a large consultancy to go and do some real research and work it out. But I'm not sure that's coming along. But
they probably suspect you'll do it anyway, Dean, so they won't pay you.
But no, that's something quite different. The other thing I think that's different is the way that the polls and the mood change so quickly over the election campaign, up and down.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question at all that the election process or the nature of the party standings started to change in August last year when Isabel Redmond was elected leader. Then you could see maybe a downward trend in Labor support, but it was wasn't a straight line, but you could sense that that was when changes were occurring. But then even during the campaign, the point made about postal votes before is that for those who got their postal vote in 3 weeks before the election, almost right on the dot, the political mood was different than it was a week later.
Yeah. Mike Rann has finally made his way towards the podium. We think, actually. He hasn't actually stepped up there yet, so I don't want to be so bold. Here we go. We're off again. This could be the second circuit of the room. Do you think it was when I said that he was going to talk by 10:15 that he decided to get stubborn?
Yeah, well, yes, you never predict for a Premier what time they'll...
Here he goes.